This video I'm going to talk about the three 3D printed components that I have made for the Dion truck. I'm going to start with the engine, then I'll move on to the gearbox, and finally I'll look at the rear differential housing. So here is the start of the engine. This is the first component, which, as you can probably deduce, is the bottom half of the engine, the crankcase. On top of that we have the core, and as you can see this is a very complicated design and would prove to be almost impossible for me to manufacture, hence the move to three-dimensional printing. On top of that then we have, I'm just going to find the component, two flanges for the blocks. Then we have two bases which go onto those, and finally we have the block tops. So there's one, there's the other, and there is a cam cover which will appear on the front of the engine now. So there we have the complete engine design. The base is printed in three components, and the blocks here are printed as three components for each block, and that's the design of the engine. And finally the engine. So this is the crankcase of the engine. I've drilled out all these little holes and put little nuts and bolts in them to make sure that it went together well, and that this hole in the center was aligned for the shaft that goes in. That's all okay, I'm happy to say. So I've also done a similar with this crankcase, sorry, with this camshaft cover. I've put the little nuts and bolts in to demonstrate that. Got a few here, and as you can probably see there, what I actually do is I put a 14BA machine screw in with a nut on it, and then I'll just chop the heads off, screw the nuts off, and then the component that will be held on there, which from recollection is an oil pipe, will go on. Of course the engine requires two heads. Here's one of the heads. So as you may remember from the video, a base, a lower cylinder piece, and then the head, shaped to take all the various components that will go onto it. So these are the exhaust ports. This is where a water pipe will go, and then on the top we'll have the carburation system, and the little holes in the base there will actually align with the holes in the base of the engine. And again, I'll put studs on it so that they then pop on to studs, and then I'll put nuts on top of them, together with all the valve gear, push rods and springs, etc., that will make the engine look very detailed. So that's the engine. The gearbox for the Dion truck. Again, it's made of multiple components. This is the core component of the gearbox. Here you can see the front of it, and then the rear of that gearbox and the bottom. And I'll just go through the components that are being printed separately and will be added. So the first one, in fact, is the input shaft holder. So you can see that that's just appeared on the front. There is a corresponding plate which goes on the rear of the gearbox, which you hopefully have just seen come on there. Then there is a lid. So there is the lid, which you can see is printed with the Dion Bouton logo. And finally, on the underneath, in position here, there is another component, and that's that. So that's the complete gearbox, made out of 5 components, and ready and set for printing. So here's the gearbox. I've been experimenting a little bit. I've put some studs to make sure I had enough metal inside. You can see the studs going in there if I had enough plastic, and then I detailed that with some 14BA studs and some nuts, so you can see the gearbox. I've got two other components. So I've got this piece which goes on the bottom here and will be held in the same way as the top is held in, and I've also got the input shaft which will go on there. So as you can see, that just pops on there like that. The piece I haven't printed yet is the front face. I shall get that printed in the next day or so, and that will be the gearbox complete. The rear differential housing. So this is the lower part of the housing that you can see here. I'll just bring that down a little so I've got a better perspective when I had the top. And of course there is an upper part to the housing with the Dion Bouton logo embossed on it. So that's the differential housing. I've yet to figure out how to put gears in that housing, which is my intention, and attach all the brass parts, but that's tomorrow's fun. And here is the printed differential. So as you can see, two parts. This is the upper part with this holding bracket, and that will be complemented by the lower part which goes on there. And as you can see, that's the differential housing that will be used. Needs a bit of finishing on the top. It's not a problem, it's just the way the printer layers. So I'll probably fill that in or infill it with some Tamiya putty or something, and then sand it down to get a better surface. So there's the gearbox. Sorry, there's the differential.